Once upon a very long time ago, at the very end, on the very edge of Great Britain, right by the sea, was a beautiful green valley, a tiny place called Porthcurno, isolated and unheard of. The valley was quite empty, few people and few buildings. Apart from the birds, the wind and the waves, there was hardly any noise. A babbling brook and a rough, narrow lane wound their way down the valley through wooded slopes until they had nowhere else to go. The track then hauled its way up the steep hill to the fields above, while the stream disappeared into a beach of bright, clean sand, beyond which was the turquoise sea, and beyond that was the rest of the world. Porthcurno was like a hidden paradise. Wild flowers carpeted the cliffs, and dolphins and seals often circled in the crystal clear water. Although isolated and despite the quiet tranquillity, there was some life in and around the valley. There were weathered farmers ploughing and planting in the fields. The huge shire horses slowly worked the land or pulled the carts when they were piled high at harvest time, with potatoes or hay, or sometimes they were golden with boxes of daffodils. Sprawling farmsteads sat high above the valley, while far below, in the sheltered coves, gnarly fishermen landed catches of pilchards or wove wicker lobster pots. The fishing families lived in tiny hamlets of granite cottages built right down by the water's edge. Each year followed the rhythm of the seasons. Everything seemed as though it went at a snail's pace, time and tide ebbing and flowing. People didn't travel far. Trade and communications were very local. Everyone worked very hard, but money was often scarce if the crops failed or if the fish didn't come in. It had always been like this, and seemed as if it probably always would be. One day, however, which began like every other day, with a weather check and a whistle to the dog or smoke of a pipe, strangers arrived in Porthcurno. Visitors were unusual in the valley, particularly those wearing top hats and suits, carrying important-looking bags and canes. Although it was very unusual, and though the visitors appeared to be very serious and obviously meant business, no one would have guessed that after their visit, life in the quiet green valley would never be the same again. After that day, more visitors began arriving. Many serious-looking men with big moustaches gathered in Porthcurno, shutting themselves away once they had arrived. Secret talks went on for weeks and months round large polished tables. Occasionally the men were spotted on the cliffs or on the beach. They seemed to be measuring and calculating. Nobody knew what was going on. It was a complete mystery. Then an extraordinary day dawned. Fishermen out in their small boats watched a tall rigged ship appear over the horizon. It sailed right into Porthcurno Bay and anchored just off the steep sandy beach. On shore, a large crowd waited. A line of people formed, snaking its way down to the water. From that dramatic day, life began to change for everyone in and around the valley. The pace of the cable project increased. One underwater cable became 2, then 3, then 14. It turned out that while the farmers and fishermen were continuing to raise the crops and fish the seas, the cablemen had been connecting Porthcurno with the rest of the world. A message whizzed over 5,000 miles from Porthcurno to India, faster than it went across the 9 miles to Penzance. Much more activity was necessary to keep the cable industry going. In the early days of this new industry, a few local people got involved by providing some services to the company.
Local fishermen really probably did quite well out of it. I'm not so sure it spread so much to Penberth.
No, but I mean, I think,
so small,
as I was saying, it went as far as maybe St Buryan. Well, when I worked down there, a lot of people from St Buryan worked at Cable and Wireless. But it didn't stretch past there. I mean, I think the effect of Cable and Wireless was only on the immediate surroundings.
You're talking later, you're talking 1970s.
Well, even in earlier days, they wouldn't have had to, they couldn't have got lodgings in Penzance, for example.
No.
They would have had to have been out here somewhere. So I think the effect was only on a very sort of small area around Porthcurno.
The fishermen and the farmers and their families found they could earn money by working for the Eastern Telegraph Company. Accommodation for some of the visitors from London was found. Firstly, in the small cottages, where the young men slept here and there between drying fishing nets and empty milk churns.
You know, the accommodation came on later on, but in my time, in the 70s, obviously, there was all the accommodation had been built. I can remember one extra block being put on the back of Zodiac, so that was extended during my lifetime down there.
Laundry services were provided by local women who carried the heavy loads from Porthcurno across the fields to their small cottages. The washing was done by the well and then carried back again. An exhausting task.
One of the main laundry women before the First World War, she was in St Burian. I mean, how do you manage that? She used to use there was I think there was a water tank there in the middle of St Burian. I think she used to use that, and she was really poor.
Mostly, however, through the early years, it was the company and the locals, living and working side by side, but separately. Activities that went on behind the closed doors of the company buildings were hidden from people beyond.
But certainly when I worked there, the overriding impression for me was the distinction between foreign service staff and local people. That there was a huge divide.
Even if anyone had overheard conversations, it was as though a foreign language was being spoken. A system of duplexing with a rheostat of low resistance, balanced condensers and inductive resistances. The farmers carried on farming, just as they always had. The fishermen kept on fishing in the same old ways. But for these local people, life was changing faster than they knew. Porthcurno, on the end, at the very edge of Great Britain, had become the centre of communications across the world. It was now a very important place. When the world was plunged into war, the Porthcurno cable station went underground for safety and security. Local miners blasted into the rock and created a hidden series of tunnels inside the hill.
Yeah, we would walk into the tunnel and you couldn't hear yourself talk. It was that bad. But it was top secret. I shouldn't have been in there.
And what was your dad doing?
My father, he left Gaver Mine to work down Porthcurno Tunnel. Yeah, he was a...
Did we dynamite it?
Yeah. It was only like in Gaver, it won a great deal of top men. And my father was one and his brothers and another uncle of mine. The top men was the one that did the blasting, you know.
The base at Porthcurno played a hugely critical role in the exchanging of messages throughout these dark years. Machinery whirred, knocked, buzzed and pinged all day, every day. Porthcurno cable station was operating flat out. It was very noisy, with all of the Morse perforators, spark coils, slip winders and siphon recorders working away inside the buildings. More and more people began to arrive and stay in Porthcurno. More and more beds were needed, more and more food was needed. In fact, more and more of everything. New white buildings began to pop up along the narrow lane. These smart new places provided comfortable offices, bedrooms, workspaces and leisure areas set in neatly kept gardens. All of this new development brought new opportunities for local people to work as builders, cooks, cleaners, maintenance men and gardeners. Matrons and doctors were needed to check on everyone and make sure that all was well.
People out here, the main concern was making money. However they made it. I mean,
There wasn't much else to do.
A relative of Julius, I mean, he was a builder, he had a campsite.
The valley was not so peaceful anymore. First, numerous carts and wagons trundled down into the valley, and then over the years it was cars and trucks with materials and provisions. Dozens of people and loads of equipment made the journey down into the valley on a daily basis. Each day, all of the cable and wireless, as it was now known, at the company, people sat down to breakfast, lunch and dinner. There may be 105 meals or more prepared and served at midday, plus the breakfast and dinners for everyone. That's a lot of potatoes, sausages, carrots, milk and bread. People were also thirsty, so as well as lots of eating going on, possibly over 200 cups of tea were drunk every day.
I was a supplier of milk to Cable and Wireless Company. But yeah, back in the day, I mean, I didn't really have any involvement with college until I was coming around my father when he was delivering milk to them, which was back in a big old metal churn back in the days. And we were there every day. The milk was delivered to us from the creamery in St Earth. But I'm sure back before then, it was probably there was a creamery in the parish, but that was long before my time, probably before my father's time as well. So yeah, the milk used to come from St Earth, and we used to deliver it on a daily basis. There was a big old kitchen down there then. There was a lot of students. And there was all sorts of things that went on. I mean, a lot of Asian families down there, Middle Eastern families. And I can remember one day going up the steps and, about first floor, second floor, suddenly met blood coming down the stairs towards me. And it was, I forgot what feast it was, perhaps it was, but they'd just been killing a goat upstairs and the goat just had his throat cut with blood. I'm not sure this should be broadcast there.
And we used to deliver up to 5 crates of milk a day to the students down there. And I can sort of remember one day I went down there to deliver milk, and one of the students was in the upstairs window and shouted down, "Can you throw me a bottle of milk up here?" So I sort of looked at him and started laughing. I said, "Yeah, well, I'll give it a shot if you like." So anyway, I said, "You ready?" Picked up this bottle of milk and did an underarm swing, threw it straight through the window, not smash it, straight through the window, caught him straight between the legs.
More years went by. The Cable and Wireless Company became a training college, so that meant more visitors, this time not just from London but from all over the world. The narrow lane was often busy with a lot of traffic and noisy young men going up and down in their cars. For entertainment, trips were made into Penzance and local dances were held in the valley.
The people live in Crean nowadays who don't remember it, when back in the 70s and 60s, when I lived there, it was a rat run for students back in those days. And you had to take your life in your hands because the students used to have a notice board on the down in the accommodation, and the students were coming and going from the college, and they were handing their cars on to the next one before the days of MOTs. And so you could always go and find a cheap car down on the notice board down in the students' hall. And so, I'm sure it was before the days of MOTs, because cars used to rattle through our place and you had to take your life in your hands.
The cable and wireless world was mainly inhabited by men, so special buses were arranged for local women to be able to come along to the social evenings. It was very exciting for the young women to meet the young men who had arrived in Porthcurno from such faraway places to study in the valley.
My children went to St Nevin's School, was a really multicultural school with so many different nationalities and religions and things like that, which for a school in West Cornwall, or in Cornwall at all, must have been very unusual, because it was a mix that we had as children as well with the students and their families. And so, that was a great thing about St Leven at the time.
Sports events were held and music hall, theatrical performances also took place. Cable and Wireless had bought up the valley. Porthcurno was buzzing. The Cable and Wireless Company was a good employer, and local people were still keen to work for it or to work alongside it, providing services or supplies. There was a busy local shop, a post office, a pub, tennis courts, a school, new faces continually coming and going. The buses were full, people made friends, got married, children played, and everything was very busy, and all of the time Porthcurno was in touch with the rest of the world. This sounds like a happy ending, but of course it wasn't really an ending, because actually what it had been all along was a particular era, and eras come and go, and then the next one comes along. More years went by. Cable and Wireless was relocated further north. The continual flow of tutors, new students and associated activities came to a halt. Bags were packed, equipment was boxed, stuff was sold or put into storage, and the valley began to empty out. In Porthcurno, life soon changed again as things quietened down. The farmers carried on farming, but most of their produce went out of the area. The fishing boats still went out, though there were fewer of them, and the local shop and post office closed due to lack of business. The social life in the valley dwindled, and the smart buildings got a bit cobwebby, were demolished or sold on to other non-telegraph people. Part of the Cable and Wireless complex was converted into a museum, designed to tell the extraordinary tale of the beautiful green valley at the end of the edge of Great Britain, and how it came to be, for a time, at the centre of the world of communications. Porthcurno was about to enter into another era, but that's another story.